Hey everyone, this is Neeraj. So a lot of people talk about real estate and real estate in a different perspective. So when the market goes up, market goes down. So today we're going to talk about how the market is and what the real estate is, and who else we can have. We can talk more than somebody who's been long time, in decades in the business. So there are tons of experience under their belt. Not only they're working the business, but they also lead at the biggest, I would say, Royal LePage, the brokerage in Canada. So please help me welcome Mr. Chris Lydon. Hello, how are you, sir?
I'm great. Nice to see you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for coming. I know you're busy and taking your time out of your schedule. Totally appreciate that. So Chris, so today's viewers, some of them are new, some of them are new, and some are experienced in it. But let's talk about something about historical growth of real estate in Toronto.
Sure.
The reason I want to take it like what happened in the past, today, and a lot of myths. We're trying to debunk those ones as well, and what's in the future. So give me a perspective a little bit about in the historic growth and the state or maybe sort of a trends we have seen in Toronto real estate growth.
Sure, absolutely. It's, Toronto, it has been growing for decades, and we're very lucky from a real estate perspective to be in a city that has tremendous growth like Toronto.
Right.
And we've seen, if you look back over the last, since we track it since 1980, the average price has grown in around 6 to 7% every year.
Right.
Now, some years it's been super high,
Yeah.
and some years it's actually contracted a little bit. But on average, over that time period, it's about 6 to 7%. So it's something that, not that I can say you can count on, but over time, that seems to be the trend.
That's a trend on here. So a lot of people, when it comes to the real estate, I heard that the real estate is a long-term thing.
Yes.
I want to talk from the mindset perspective, but generally the people, their mindset changes when the changes in the market is.
Yes.
So they start thinking in a short term. So, but then we also study the data. So when it says market stats are important, short term, long term, I just want you to understand what's the importance of this market stats. We are still thinking in a short term. So what's the importance of that?
Well, I think for human nature, when we're in the middle of something, that's what we focus on.
Right.
So when we're in the middle of or we're most focused on the information that's most present to us, right? So
right.
when we with the markets today, everybody asks, well, how's the market today? Well, the market today is changing because interest rates are changing. Right?
Sure.
And
Yeah.
it's all purposeful.
Right.
There's no real surprise to it.
Right.
The surprise really in our case in this particular market change is how fast rates are changing.
Right.
We all anticipated them to change, but maybe not so quick.
Right.
But what's important, back to your point about looking at data, is to really give you a broader perspective of the market, because the last thing I would want somebody to do is to make a decision based on what they're just seeing at this moment in the market, instead of taking a step back and saying, okay, well, let's analyze at certain points in the evolution of the real estate market, how's it behaved? So where have there been other problems over the past 3 or 4 decades where the markets had some more dramatic changes, and what happened there, and then how long did it take for it to recover? Why did it happen? And so we can look at our charts over the last 40 years and say, oh, remember back in 2008, 2009 in the global financial crisis?
Yeah.
And there was a challenge there in the market, and what happened, and what did the Bank of Canada do to manage our way through that? We can look at the 2017, not too far long ago, and say, okay,
5 years, yeah.
right, 5 years
There you
ago,
go, yeah.
back then we had a mini bubble in housing prices. Well, what happened, and what did they do? Well, they brought in the 16-point fair housing plan, and the market adjusted and got back to kind of more normal, healthy price appreciation.
Right.
So that's why I think it's important to be aware of what's gone on in the market,
Right.
study that, so that the last thing you want to do is make a quick decision thinking, oh my goodness, I better sell because the market's going to crash and my real estate's going to be worthless.
Sure.
Well, history would show us that that's not the case.
Right. So you're saying is the data is to give us kind of a study just to understand the pattern and how quickly a market can revive back and then can start to grow.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
Like another question which a lot of people still think is real estate is very speculative. It's very risky.
Yeah.
So what would you say that?
Well, it can be. It
Right.
can be risky. It depends on how you approach it. We're always fans of buying and holding real estate. That to me is truly investing in real estate.
Right.
So speculative is really buying something in my mind for the shorter term.
Right.
So you're speculating that in the short term it's going to go up in value in real estate's case.
Right.
So which I think is risky.
Sure.
In any market conditions, I think it's risky.
Yes.
So we're always big proponents of buying, holding, putting either a tenant in place or redeveloping property and changing the use of the property, and then allowing that to appreciate over time, allow the tenants to help you pay for the property. That to me is a good, successful real estate investment. And I think also less stressful because you're not counting on trying to time the market.
This is time in the market.
Exactly. It's time in the market, not timing the market. And
Right.
I think that's a big change in the risk profile of the investment.
Okay. And let's talk about it currently. Like current market has changed. You mentioned that the interest rates are, it's going up, and
Yeah.
like when looking at that, a lot of questions, in everybody's mind. When is that going to stop? Is it market going to tank? Is it 10, 15, 20% a drop? Am I expecting it? I mean, then plus, and 100 and more questions coming in everybody's mind.
Yes.
What's your take on that?
Well, great question. And ultimately, we don't have all the information. We never do in any time in the market.
Nobody has crystal ball.
Nobody has a crystal ball. Exactly.
I forgot mine home.
Yes,
too.
I know. It's too bad. So we can take the information that we have, and really some of that I always say we have to look at the facts, right? And the facts are in our market, in the GTA, where we do most of our business, we're growing. So the population is growing.
Right.
The Canadian immigration strategy is to welcome over 400,000 people a year to Canada, and a good portion of those folks arrive in the GTA.
Sure.
So there's there's demand, right?
Right.
So that covers the demand for real estate. Supply is a hot topic today as well. So we have to look at that fact that we really we just physically aren't building enough housing to satisfy the growth in population.
Right.
So there's your supply side. So supply is pretty tight overall.
Yeah.
So when you've got demand high, supply tight, it generally is going to keep prices firm or moving upwards.
Right.
And so even though cost of ownership, which is another factor that we look at when we're assessing the condition of the market,
Right.
is definitely rising right now. We just had another rate increase last week,
Right.
and 50 basis points. So this year, the cost of ownership has been going up, the borrowing costs. Now,
Sure.
if you don't have a mortgage, it doesn't matter.
Sure.
But generally speaking, as an investor or as a first-time buyer or a buyer of real estate, you generally have a mortgage. If you do, your cost of ownership has changed, and so that affects values in the short term.
Sure.
So in this case, due to the fact that we had a quick run up in prices, specifically from the end of November, or from November of last year to February of this year, in a short period of time, we had an extra kind of push of prices.
Yeah.
That has caused prices to change with the rate increase that they brought on, because
Right.
they realized, I guess, that maybe they had kept rates too low for too long, and now, of course, they think, oh, gosh, we better change the rates. We've got an inflation challenge.
Right.
Change the rates, changes cost of ownership, and of course, that brings prices down.
Right. Okay. When you say a lot of people when they have a mortgage, at the same time the rents are also going up.
Yes, exactly. So, that's it too, right? This is the challenge we face, and
Yeah.
that's a great signal as to why we know there's a need for housing, there's demand for housing,
Right.
Because people have to live somewhere, right? So
Sure.
right, they're going to buy, or they're going to rent,
Yeah.
or they're going to share accommodation. But generally speaking, they're going to pay something for their accommodation, right?
Right.
Either purchase or rent. And right now, we're seeing tremendous pressure on rentals
On the rental market.
values.
Yeah.
Because people need somewhere to live.
Right.
So that's clearly illustrating there's massive demand out there. The rental values are going up. So as an investor, even though interest rates are rising, rents are also rising as well. So your costs are going up, but your revenue's also going up as well.
Right.
As somebody who's considering maybe should I buy or should I rent, well, if you start looking around, as you know, for somewhere to live right now from a rental perspective, you're going to pay a pretty high rent. So then you look back and say, okay, well, wait a second, maybe I should reassess buying and not renting.
Yeah.
So that I'm paying my own mortgage instead of paying a landlord's mortgage.
Right.
So it's so important to look at all the factors, and it doesn't mean you have to buy something today or you have to make a quick decision.
Sure.
What I really hope is people make an educated decision.
Right.
And I know how much you study the market as well as I do, and that's so that we can help people figure out, okay, what is right for their personal situation.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So another thing is when we be talking about now the interest rate increases. So what's your prediction as a broker, but then also, I mean, your crystal ball.
This is a tough one.
But what do you think? Next 6 months to a year, what's your prediction look like? And also the growth in real estate. Like, are you expecting the market to come back and to slow down?
That's a great question. So,
Yeah.
So two pieces there, both very good questions. Where are rates going to go, number one, and then what does that ultimately mean for housing values? So rates, we've seen a lot of movement in rates in a very short period of time. This is, I believe, if you look back at history, this will be the fastest rate move that we've, I think, ever from a percentage basis that we've ever seen in the history of the Bank of Canada.
Right.
So that's a big shift. Because it's already moved significantly, I believe we're at the tail end of rate increases.
Okay.
So that we may see a little bit more, maybe in December, depending on the data that the Bank of Canada sees over the next 6 or 8 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
That'll determine whether, less than that, over the next 5 weeks. That will determine whether there'll be another rate increase this year. They may wait until early next year, or they may determine, because I believe we're kind of at the tail end of that rate move, they may say, you know what, it's starting to do what we want it to do.
Right.
We don't need to move it anymore.
Right.
But it's somewhere in that, my feeling is it's somewhere in that area, either at the very end, so it means there might be a small rate increase required, or no rate increase at all. I also believe that these rate increases are having the desired effect, because we're seeing it in the resale market right now, where we're seeing demand has changed, which is what they wanted to accomplish.
Sure.
This isn't a surprise.
Yes.
It's exactly what they wanted to accomplish, because things had gotten too hot.
Right.
So they've been able to reduce demand by increasing these interest rates.
Right.
And so I think that with that reduction in demand, we may even see a rate decrease in the first quarter or second quarter of next year.
Mm-hmm.
Now, again, I don't think it's going to be a massive decrease,
Right.
but it could be just a quarter point, just to signal that we've accomplished what we want to accomplish.
The economy is stabilizing now.
Stabilizing now, it's much healthier,
Yeah.
we're much more comfortable, we're not having, high 7-8% inflation rates.
Right.
And we can start to, because rates can go both ways, they can go up and they can go down. So
Sure.
we can start to maybe bring them off a little bit.
Right.
So that's the interest rate, and again, I don't have a crystal ball, I'm just observing kind of from history and what we've observed over the last decade in particular on how they use interest rates to kind of keep the economy stable. And then from a home value standpoint, I don't believe we're going to see a massive run up in prices in the short term, because the Bank of Canada has said, inflation's not a great thing.
Yeah.
So, which includes rapid, price increases in real estate.
Right.
So if their goal is to kind of normalize price increases,
Yeah.
I would look more to the historical average. So we've been running at around 10% average annual price increases, which is pretty strong.
Strong. Yeah.
Yeah.
Double
So
digit, yeah.
I would suggest you want to maybe think about more mid 5 to 6% price increases over the next few years, and it may be even less than that in the short term.
Yeah.
As they kind of reestablish
Right.
a healthy growth pattern. Because remember, going through COVID, all the federal banks around the world had this, frightening pandemic to deal with, where they had to have people stop going to work.
Yeah.
Basically freeze the economy.
Right.
And so they had to drop rates so dramatically.
Yeah.
Well, now they've got to get them rebalanced. It's all part of the natural, reaction to this frightening scenario we've been through in the last couple of years.
Right.
But once we get it back to normal, I think you want to sort of account for more normal price appreciation. Nice, slow and steady. I'm a big fan of slow and steady, right? I don't like the big highs because it swings and it's very stressful for people.
It is indeed. Okay. Now, another segue right in here for the real estate investors especially.
Yes.
So real estate investors, when you say is a steady 5.5, maybe mid fives or maybe 6% appreciation. Now, how would you take a real estate investment as a strategy moving forward in, let's say, again 5 to 10 years? The reason I'm saying is because you mentioned a couple of things about, immigration.
Yes.
A lot of people been coming. The rates been stabilizing. We still need city is growing. At a time it was only, GTA was like smaller. Now the GTA as a board, they also expanded their area as well.
Yes.
So moving forward 5 to 10 years, what strategy, like as a real estate, as an investment strategy, what would you recommend to the investors?
I'm a fan of buy and hold.
Okay.
So that's what I would look at it and say, okay, we're going to back to more normal, hopefully more normal, steady price appreciation.
Right.
And if you model out that type of growth, the returns are fantastic.
Right.
And the fact that you have residential real estate, if that's what your investment choice is, where people need place to live,
Sure.
you should have pretty consistent positive cash flow. Because we're short supply, finding tenants is generally pretty, not easy because it takes work, but
But it's possible.
it's consistent.
Consistent, yeah.
By all means.
Yeah.
There's definitely demand out there. And so with that in mind, if you're thinking over, which you should be over a 5 to 10 year, 20-year timeline, the results are going to be pretty exciting
Right.
for your real estate investment.
Right. And are you talking about just for the resale market, or are you also talking about a mix of resale and the pre-con on the both side? Because the market is also on the pre-con side is also very, very,
It is.
the supply is still limited out there, and
It
there's
is.
some recent changes also done in the pre-con world also. So
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think what you'll find right now is there's likely going to be slower number of pre-con sales because we're in a moment of time where we're getting readjusted to the new normal of the economy, right? The
Right.
new rate levels. And so when you're dealing with that type of change in the moment, often people pause and look around and say, okay, let me understand the marketplace a little bit. So you're likely going to see headlines where transaction volume is going to be lower in the pre-construction market. But I don't want somebody to read that as being pre-construction's not a good idea.
right.
For certain situations where you're thinking very long term with your real estate, the nice thing about pre-construction is you can put the deposit down over time, usually 2 or 3 years to
Yeah.
submit the deposit. So it allows you to even out your cash flow situation of your personal deposits, the money you're committing to the deposit. You can find great locations, brand new buildings when you take delivery of that investment. There's great opportunities in like close to universities or close to places of employment. You can find some tremendous opportunities. So I think there's great opportunities there. You're also likely, due to this temporary change in the market, you're going to see some great builder incentives where builders are going to, who are kind of in the midst of a project, need to get their final unit sold.
Right.
And you're going to see some great incentives there. So there might be some great opportunities out there, very compelling investment opportunities in new construction. But it really depends on your personal goals. So, today we can give some broad ideas that people can kind of think about, but really what they need to do is they need to speak to an expert who will really sit down and determine what that individual's investment plan would be best for them in
Right.
their scenario.
Right.
And I think that's most important for people to really digest is we can, talk about the general market conditions in different pockets or different areas of real estate, but really everybody has their own personal scenario.
Sure.
So that's why you've got to make sure that you speak to an expert who really is going to listen to, okay, what's your scenario? Let's go through it, let's see what your goals are, and then figure out what the right strategy is. And it may be to wait.
Sure.
Right at the end of the day. It might be to wait. Say, you know what, why don't we wait for now might not be the right time. Let's watch for the right time for your scenario and then create a great result. Or resale or pre-construction. Depends on the individual's situation.
Talking about the country's economy versus personal economy.
That's exactly it. Exactly it.
Anyways, Chris, thank you very much for your time. Totally appreciate that.
My pleasure, Raj.
And this is actually so valuable for everybody who's watching it, and obviously, especially coming from the expert.
Certainly, lots of years of experience.
Well, I think you talk to if not hundreds, at least thousands of people every single week. They to
Yes.
your signature lives and podcasts and stuff like that. But I really appreciate your time. Thank
My
you.
pleasure.
Thank you so much. Bye.